The city woke up before the sun every day. Buses groaned, shops rolled open their metal doors, and people moved fast with tired faces and busy minds. In this city, no one had time to stop. No one had time to look closely at anyone else. Everyone was chasing something. Everyone believed their own struggle was the hardest. Among the many faces that blended into the streets was a man most people never truly saw. He walked slowly, not because he was weak, but because he had learned that rushing no longer brought him anywhere better. He wore clean but old clothes, the kind that had been washed many times and patched with care. Over his shoulder, he carried a long black case. It was scratched and faded, like it had traveled through many years. People assumed the case held tools or broken things. Some thought it was trash he had picked up. Others thought it belonged to something stolen. Very few guessed it carried a violin. He usually stood near the entrance of an underground station. It was a place where people passed through, but never stayed. They rushed down the stairs or hurried out, eyes fixed on phones or the ground. Coins sometimes fell from pockets, but no one noticed. Words were rarely spoken there, except for short, sharp sounds of impatience. She passed through that station every morning. Her life was busy, organized, and loud. She worked long hours, spoke to many people, and measured her days by deadlines and goals. She believed success showed clearly on the outside. Nice clothes, confident steps, loud laughter, and strong voices. Anyone without those signs barely existed in her world. The first time she noticed the man was not because he stood out, but because he was in her way. He moved slower than the crowd, and for a moment she had to step around him. She felt annoyed. In her mind, he was just another obstacle in an already tiring day. She glanced at him once. That was all. His head was lowered, his grip on the case gentle, almost careful. He did not beg. He did not speak. He simply stood there, like he had nowhere else to go and no reason to explain himself. She thought nothing of him after that. Days passed. The city stayed the same. Noise, movement, and pressure filled every corner. Yet the man was always there. Same place. Same quiet presence. Same case. Others noticed him too, but only enough to judge. Some whispered that he was lazy. Some believed he was waiting for handouts. A few avoided him completely, afraid he might ask for something. The truth was, he never asked. He watched people instead. He watched how their faces changed when they thought no one was looking. How tired eyes softened for a second when they heard a song from a passing car. How shoulders relaxed when laughter escaped during a phone call. He understood these moments well. He had lived them before. There was a time when his life had been full of sound. Not the harsh sound of traffic, but the warm, careful sound of music. Back then, his hands were always busy. Strings, wood, notes, silence between notes. His days were shaped by practice, mistakes, and slow improvement. Music had not been a dream to him. It had been his breath. Now, music stayed locked inside the case. The violin inside was old. Older than most things he owned, the wood had darkened with age, and the strings had been replaced many times. It was not perfect, but it carried a voice that matched his own. Quiet at first, but deep, if allowed. To speak, he did not open the case often. There were reasons for that. The station was not a friendly place. Guards moved people along. Performers needed permits. Loud sounds brought attention, and attention brought questions. He was not ready for questions. Not yet, so he waited. She kept passing him each day, barely aware of his presence. To her, he became part of the background, like a broken sign or a dirty wall. Something that existed but did not matter. One morning, rain fell hard. People crowded closer together, holding bags over their heads. Water splashed onto the station floor. The man stood in the same place, rain touching his shoulders. He did not move. She saw him again that day. For a brief moment, she wondered why he did not leave. Why he did not find shelter or a better place. Then her phone buzzed, and the thought disappeared. Her world pulled her forward again, but something small stayed behind in her mind. A question she did not fully hear. That evening, as she walked back through the station, the man was still there. His clothes were damp. His hands were red from the cold. Yet his grip on the case remained careful, almost loving. She slowed for half a step. Not enough to stop, but enough to look again. He looked ordinary. Too ordinary. The kind of person people forget the moment they look away. No signs of talent. No signs of importance. No signs of anything special. She shook her head slightly, as if brushing away a useless thought, and continued walking. The man noticed her that time, not because she was different from the others, but because she looked directly at him, even if only for a second. Most people never did. When they did, their eyes were filled with judgment or fear. Hers were filled with distance, like he was already decided. He did not blame her. He had once judged others the same way. Late at night, when the station emptied and the city slowed, he sometimes opened the case just a little, just enough to see the violin resting inside. He did not touch it. He only looked. His fingers would hover above the strings, then pull back. Memories came easily, then bright rooms, quiet halls, the soft sound of breath held by listeners, applause that felt warm, not loud. A life where his name mattered, even if only to a few. A life that ended faster than he ever expected. The city did not know any of this. To the city, he was just a man standing still while everyone else rushed to her. He was still a nobody, but the story was only beginning. The next few days moved slowly for him, though the city never slowed. Morning came with the same noise, the same rush, the same faces that never stayed long enough to remember. He returned to his usual place near the station entrance, carrying the case like it was part of his body. Standing there was not easy, but it was familiar. Familiar felt safer than change. He had learned how to disappear while still being present. His eyes stayed soft, his body still. He did not block anyone's path. He did not ask for attention. In many ways, he had become very good at being ignored. Inside him, however, things were never quiet. Every sound around him tried to pull at old memories. The screech of a train reminded him of sharp notes played too fast. Footsteps on stone echoed like the steady beat of a rhythm he once followed without thinking. Even the wind moving through the station made him remember how music could rise and fall like breath. He fought those thoughts most days. Thinking too much made the weight in his chest heavier. So he focused on small things instead. The cracks in the floor. The patterns people made as they walked. The way light shifted across the walls as the day passed. She continued her routine. Without knowing she had become part of his small world. She was not special to him. Not yet. She was simply one of the many people who passed through his line of sight every day. But there was something about the way she moved. Always fast, always straight ahead. Like slowing down would cause something terrible to happen. He noticed how she dressed carefully. How her shoes were always clean. How her phone never left her hand. She looked like someone who believed control was safety. One morning, the station was more crowded than usual. A delay had caused people to gather, growing impatient by the minute. Voices grew louder. Tempers grew shorter. The air felt tight. He stood to the side, holding his case close. Someone bumped into him hard. The case slipped slightly from his hand and hit the ground with a dull sound. A few people glanced over, annoyed rather than concerned. No one stopped. He bent down quickly, heart pounding, and picked it up. His fingers checked the locks without thinking. Relief washed over him when he felt they were still secure. She saw this for the first time. She stopped completely. She watched him kneel on the dirty floor. His shoulders tense, his face focused not on himself but on the case. There was fear there, real fear. Not the kind that came from being poor or embarrassed, but the kind that came from almost losing something precious. For a moment, she felt uncomfortable. She was not used to seeing emotion in people she had already. Decided did not matter. She looked away and stepped forward as the crowd began moving again. Still, the image stayed with her longer than she expected. Why would someone care so much about a broken old case? The question followed her through the day. He stayed longer that evening. The city lights turned on one by one, and the station grew quieter. This was his favorite time. When the noise softened and people became fewer, the space felt less heavy. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes for a few seconds. That was when the memories came back stronger than usual. He remembered his hands when they were younger, stronger, faster. He remembered the first time he held a violin and how wrong it felt at first, like holding something alive that could slip away if he wasn't careful. He remembered the hours of practice when his fingers ached and his back burned, and how he kept going anyway. He remembered believing that effort always led somewhere good. Life had proven him wrong. The turning point in his life had not been loud or dramatic. It had come quietly, wrapped in responsibility and loss. One moment he was planning his future. The next, he was choosing survival over passion. Music became something he carried instead of lived. That night, as he prepared to leave, he opened the case just enough to adjust the strap inside. The violin rested there, silent and patient. His fingers brushed the wood by accident. The feeling sent a sharp ache through his chest. He closed the case quickly, like someone shutting a door before something escaped. She noticed the sound. It was small, almost nothing, but it caught her attention. She was walking past when she heard the faint click of metal and the soft movement inside the case. She slowed again, pretending to check her phone. She told herself she was just curious. She glanced toward him and saw. His expression changed before he noticed her looking. For a split second, his face was not empty or distant. It was full of something she could not name. Longing, maybe, or grief. Then it was gone. He straightened, adjusted the strap, and walked away like nothing had happened. She stood there longer than she meant to. That night, she thought about him more than she wanted to admit. It bothered her. He did not fit into her usual understanding of people. He was not asking for help. He was not trying to impress anyone. He simply existed, carrying something that clearly mattered to him. The next morning, she arrived earlier than usual. He was already there. This time she noticed details she had missed before. The careful way he placed his feet, the way he shifted his weight when standing too long. The faint marks on his hands, not from rough labor, but from something more precise. Her mind searched for answers without her permission. Could he be a failed musician? A hobbyist? Someone holding on to a dream that never worked out? She almost laughed at herself. It was none of her business. Still, when she passed him, her steps slowed again. He felt it. He felt her hesitation like a change in the air. He did not look up. He had learned that meeting eyes too often invited misunderstandings. But he knew she was there. Something inside him stirred. Not hope, not fear, something quieter, recognition. Someone was finally seeing him as more than background noise. As the day went on, he found it harder to ignore the violin. The weight of the case felt heavier than usual, like it was asking him a question he had avoided for years. That evening, when the station grew quiet again, he made a small decision, not a brave one, not a loud one, just a small one. He rested the case on the ground and sat beside it. His hand moved to the locks, then stopped. He took a slow breath. Not today, he told himself. But soon, across the station, she watched from a distance. Pretending not to, she did not know why she stayed. She only knew that something was about to change. That evening, the station felt different. The usual chaos was missing. Fewer people hurried through the tunnels. The hum of the trains seemed softer. Even the wind moving through the station sounded quieter, like it was waiting for something. He sat on the edge of a worn bench, the case resting against his leg. His hands lingered near the locks, not touching the violin yet. His heart beat unevenly, a rhythm that matched the hesitation in his mind. Years of holding back, years of silence, had led to this exact moment. Though he did not know it, she appeared at the entrance, carrying her bag loosely in one hand. She stopped as soon as she saw him. This time, there was no hurry in her movements. She stood still, watching without being seen. The curiosity she had fought all week could not be hidden anymore for the first time. She noticed small details about him. The faint tremble in his hands, the tension in his shoulders, the way he breathed, as if each inhale was a negotiation with himself. She wondered what kind of life made someone move like that. Someone who looked ordinary, yet carried an invisible weight. The man finally opened the case. He did it slowly, deliberately, as though he were afraid that rushing would break something inside. The old violin rested there, worn and familiar. The wood had darkened with age, and the strings were polished unevenly from constant care. It was beautiful, even in its imperfection. He did not play immediately. He simply let his fingers hover above the strings, feeling the cold metal and smooth wood. His eyes closed for a moment, and in that brief silence, years of memory rushed back. The first time he held this instrument, the applause from small audiences, the laughter and tears of practice sessions, the dreams he had once believed in, the losses he had suffered. She could see the change in him, though he had not looked up. His body relaxed slightly, though his hands remained careful. Something inside him softened. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for her. Finally, he lifted the violin and placed it under his chin. The first note was hesitant, soft, almost afraid. It wobbled, unsteady, like a child learning to walk, but it was alive. It filled the station with a fragile sound, quiet yet impossible to ignore. People passing by slowed, glanced, and moved on, but she stayed. She could not look away. The second note was stronger, more certain. His hands moved with a memory that did not need teaching. The bow slid across the strings smoothly, producing a sound that was both sad and beautiful. It was not perfect. It was human, raw, real. She felt something in her chest tighten. It was the first time she had ever truly listened to him. Not as a stranger in the background, not as someone to ignore. She listened as though his music was speaking directly to her. The melody grew. Each note told a story she could not name. There was sorrow, yes, but also hope. A gentle reminder that life did not end at failure or loss, that even broken things could produce beauty. He did not glance at her. He did not need to. The music carried more than words ever could. It was confession, apology, and celebration all at once. It was every feeling he had buried for years, finally released. People began to stop. Some leaned against walls, pretending to check their phones, but their ears were caught. A woman dropped her shopping bag and watched from a distance. A young man with a briefcase froze in mid-step. The station, which had been so loud and careless before, now listened. She felt tears gather in her eyes. She did not understand why. She did not know the man. She had never spoken to him. But somehow, she understood him through his music. It reached parts of her she had not known existed. Parts that remembered pain, hope, and quiet strength. His eyes remained closed, yet he felt the attention. It was not surprising or frightening. It was acknowledgement. The sound of recognition without judgment. It was the first time in years someone had noticed his music. Not as noise, not as nuisance, but as something important. He continued playing, letting the notes fill the empty spaces. The melody shifted, sometimes light, sometimes heavy. It mirrored the city outside. It mirrored life itself. And she felt it all. As if the music was telling the story she could not see otherwise. The violin sang of past regrets, of dreams set aside, of love lost and moments cherished. It was not a performance meant for applause. It was a story meant to be heard. The kind of story that needed no words. The kind of story that demanded attention from anyone willing to listen. Time passed, though she did not know how long. When the last note finally lingered in the air, it felt like the city itself exhaled. People moved again, but slowly. They carried the echo of the sound with them, even if they did not understand it. She remained still for a moment longer, stunned by what she had witnessed. The man had lowered the violin and closed the case. His hands shook slightly, not from cold, but from the weight of letting go and holding on at the same time. He stood and walked away. Like he had done every day, but something had changed. The air around him was different. He was not invisible anymore, at least not to her. She had seen the truth behind the case, behind the worn clothes, behind the quiet presence. For the first time, she felt a pang of regret. She had thought he was just another nobody. She had judged him without knowing him. Now she knew that her assumptions were shallow and wrong. She had underestimated the depth of life and experience a person could carry. She wanted to speak to him, to say something, anything, but he was already gone from sight. Her feet felt heavy. Her mind buzzed. She understood finally that greatness was not always loud or visible. Sometimes it was quiet, hidden in careful hands and an old, faithful instrument. That night, she could not sleep. She kept thinking of the music. She could hear the notes as if they were still in her room, echoing off the walls. She wondered how someone so ordinary-looking could produce something so extraordinary. How she had walked by him for days and never seen the soul behind the quiet exterior. Meanwhile, he went home carrying the case carefully. His hands ached, but not from the weight. They ached from the release. The act of playing, even for a few moments, had shaken something loose inside him. A part of him he thought he had buried forever had breathed again. He did not know if anyone had truly heard him. Beyond the passing glance of strangers, but that did not matter. He had felt it himself. He had touched the music, let it speak, and it had spoken back. In that city filled with noise and haste, two people had shared a moment without words. One had offered music, the other had listened, and without knowing it, their lives had changed. The next morning, the station felt alive in a different way. People rushed past as always, but something about the air was softer, lighter. Like the echo of music from the previous evening had left a mark. He arrived early, as usual, carrying his old case. His steps were measured, deliberate, but there was a quiet energy around him that had not been there before. She arrived later, but this time she did not rush past. She moved slowly, careful not to seem obvious but drawn to him. Her curiosity was no longer casual. It had become a quiet concern mixed with wonder. She remembered the music. The sound stayed in her mind. It was more than just notes. It was a story, a language that spoke directly to feelings she had kept buried. He noticed her presence almost immediately, not with alarm, but with a faint awareness. He had grown used to being invisible. Now, the fact that someone was paying attention unsettled him slightly, though not unpleasantly. He adjusted the strap on his case, pretending to do so for the sake of routine. But he knew she had noticed. The day passed in the usual pattern of the station. Yet both of them were aware of an invisible thread connecting them. She watched him, trying to understand why someone so ordinary in appearance could produce something so extraordinary. She wondered about his life, his story, and the weight he carried in silence. He, on the other hand, felt the shift in attention, though he did not understand why it mattered so much. He had learned long ago not to rely on anyone noticing him. That evening, the station emptied, leaving only the faint hum of trains in the distance. He set the case down, feeling the familiar pressure of decisions he had postponed for years. Tonight, the music would come again, but it would carry more than emotion. It would carry the fragments of a life no one knew. He lifted the violin, feeling its familiar weight, and began to play. The notes were slower at first, cautious, as if testing the air. Then they grew steady, forming melodies that spoke of hope, loss, and persistence. Each note seemed to draw more attention. A few late commuters paused, their ears catching the unexpected beauty in the quiet station. Some had no idea who he was, but the music demanded their presence. She stood at a distance, unable to move. She realized she wanted to know him, not just hear him. She wanted to understand the person behind the music, the hands that had shaped each note, and the heart that had kept it alive despite years of silence. She felt an unfamiliar pull, a desire to see the truth beyond appearances, as the music played. Memories began to emerge, not just for her, but for him. He remembered days filled with rigorous practice, moments when he felt alive in a way nothing else could match. He recalled the applause of small audiences, the feeling of connection that came from sharing something pure. But he also remembered the sudden changes that tore his life apart: family responsibilities, unexpected hardships. in a series of small failures that accumulated until he stepped away from the stage entirely. She watched him closely, noticing the subtle shifts in posture, the way his fingers moved over the strings, and the brief smiles that crossed his face when he hit a note perfectly. The music revealed more than just talent. It revealed endurance, sorrow, and resilience. She realized that she had underestimated him completely. He was not merely a man standing in a station. He was someone who had carried a lifetime of experiences and had learned to survive without recognition. When the last note lingered in the air, a silence fell over the station that felt heavier than any crowd. He closed the case slowly, savoring the quiet that followed the storm of sound. She stayed still, not daring to move, not knowing whether to speak or remain unseen. She understood that this was a moment of truth, one that did not need words. Finally, he turned and began walking away. This time, she followed at a respectful distance, not wanting to intrude but compelled to understand more. She watched as he navigated the streets, always careful, always measured. She wanted to ask him about the violin, about the music, about the life that had brought him to this point. But words felt inadequate compared to what she had just witnessed. Days passed and their routines continued. He returned to the station each day, sometimes playing, sometimes silent. She continued to watch, learning more with every glance, every small gesture. She saw the way he interacted with the environment, how he avoided conflict, how he treated others with quiet respect, how he carried the weight of the case without complaint. She realized that there was dignity in his simplicity and strength in his restraint. Then, one afternoon, an unexpected moment changed everything. A passerby recognized him from years before. Someone who had seen him perform in a different city, on a stage filled with lights and applause. The recognition was immediate, whispered across the station, drawing curious eyes. The man had lived a life of accomplishment, known to few, but remembered by those who had seen him shine. His past was no longer hidden, though it had been carefully contained for years. She learned the truth slowly. He had once been a respected musician, traveling to perform, teaching others, sharing his talent widely. Life had forced him to step away, lost responsibility. Circumstances beyond control, but he had never stopped carrying the music within him. The violin was not merely an instrument. It was a vessel of memory, resilience, and identity. She felt a wave of understanding and respect. Her initial judgment, her dismissal of him as a nobody, felt foolish and shallow. She realized that people's appearances rarely tell the full story. She had walked past him many times without knowing the depth he carried. And now she understood that she had been blind to the quiet power of survival, passion, and commitment. The station, once a place of anonymity and rush, had become a stage for a revelation. His story, once silent and hidden, had found a way to reach those who would listen. And in the process, she had learned a lesson about empathy, judgment, and the hidden lives of those around her. That evening she approached him cautiously. She did not speak immediately, afraid that words might ruin the fragile connection built by music and silent observation. Instead, she stood at a distance, offering acknowledgement and presence. He noticed, just as she had noticed him before, a quiet recognition passed between them. No words were exchanged, but both understood that something had shifted. She saw him, really saw him, and he saw that someone had begun to understand. The music had done its work. It had revealed truth, created respect, and bridged the distance between two lives that had existed side by side, without meeting. As the city carried on outside, the station held a moment suspended in time. Two people, once strangers, were connected by sight, sound, and unspoken understanding. And in that connection, the promise of new beginnings quietly took root. Days turned into weeks, and the station began to feel different to both of them. What had once been a place of noise, rush, and overlooked faces was now a silent stage for understanding and connection. He continued to arrive with his violin case, and she continued to observe from a careful distance. No longer out of casual curiosity, but out of a desire to truly know someone who had touched her heart in ways she could not fully explain. The recognition of his past began to spread slowly. Some commuters who had once passed him without notice now paused, their eyes reflecting surprise and curiosity. A few older musicians noticed him and remembered his name from performances long ago. The whispers of recognition brought no arrogance to him. He carried it quietly with dignity, never letting the acknowledgement change. The careful humility that had become his habit, she finally gathered the courage to approach him. It was not a dramatic gesture or a loud declaration. She simply walked a few steps closer one evening, letting her presence be known without interrupting his focus. He sensed her approach, as he had come to sense many small changes in the environment, but he did not react immediately. He remained calm, holding the case gently, aware that any sudden movement might break the fragile moment they had unknowingly shared over weeks. When she spoke, her voice was low and sincere. She did not offer praise or judgment, only a simple acknowledgement. "I hear you. I see you." He looked up slowly, meeting her eyes for the first time directly. There was no surprise, no fear, only a quiet recognition that someone had finally noticed him fully. For years he had existed on the margins, and now someone was truly present. That was enough. The connection between them grew in small, careful steps. She began to understand his world, the one shaped by music and loss, patience and resilience. She learned about the years he had spent performing in small halls, the moments of applause that had been both comforting and fleeting, and the tragedies that had forced him into silence for a long time. Every story he shared revealed strength, endurance, and a heart that refused to break completely. He shared his music more openly now. He played in the station not for strangers but for those who truly listened. The crowd that gathered was no longer just casual passersby. They were people who paused, who felt, who understood. The notes carried the depth of experience, the sorrow of loss, and the quiet joy of small victories. Each performance built a bridge between him and the world, a world that had often ignored him. She watched each note, each movement, with growing admiration. She realized that the man she had once dismissed as nobody was extraordinary, in a way that mattered far beyond appearances. His greatness was not in fame or wealth, but in resilience, in the ability to create beauty despite adversity. She began to understand that people's stories were often invisible, and that every person carried hidden depths and histories. One afternoon, a local journalist stopped to listen. She had heard of the violinist through the whispers of recognition and curiosity. The journalist asked to learn his story. He hesitated, unused to attention, but eventually agreed. The article that followed was simple and heartfelt, describing a man who had carried a lifetime of music and emotion quietly, without seeking praise, only to touch the lives of those who truly listened. It did not sensationalize or exaggerate. It merely told the truth. The piece spread slowly, first through the local community and then online. People were moved, inspired, and curious. Some came to hear him play, others to witness the quiet dignity of someone who had endured so much without complaint. But he remained humble, never letting the attention change his routine. The violin was still a companion, not a tool for fame. She continued to be part of his quiet audience. Over time, she approached him more openly, sharing small conversations that revealed common interests, shared struggles, and quiet laughter. Their connection was not sudden or dramatic. It was built over countless small moments, careful understanding that grew stronger with each interaction. The man's life, once hidden and solitary, slowly began to expand. Opportunities arose, not for wealth or recognition, but for teaching, collaboration, and the quiet joy of shared music. His violin became a symbol of resilience, testament to the strength that comes from enduring life's hardships without surrender. She, too, changed. She learned to see beyond appearances, to listen without judgment, and to value depth over surface. Her life, once measured by schedules and success, gained new dimensions of empathy, patience, and understanding. She had thought she understood the world, but he showed her that there was so much more beneath the surface of every person she encountered. One evening, as he played his violin with a small group gathered in the station, she noticed the subtle smiles on the faces around her. The music had touched them, had reached places words could not. She looked at him and realized that he was no longer invisible, not just to her, but to the world. And yet he remained gentle, humble, true to himself. When the final note lingered and faded into silence, there was a collective pause. The city outside continued its rush, but within the station, a quiet reverence remained. The man closed the case, carefully as always, and for the first time, he looked directly at her with a smile that acknowledged their journey together, a silent understanding of respect, recognition, and shared humanity. In that moment, she knew something important. True greatness is often quiet, unnoticed, and humble. It is found not in outward appearances or loud declarations, but in the resilience of the heart, the depth of experience, and the courage to continue despite life's trials. She thought she had walked past a nobody, but she had discovered a life filled with strength, beauty, and quiet heroism. From that day forward, Station was no longer just a place to pass through. It had become a place of connection, recognition, and inspiration. And for both of them, it was a reminder that life's true value often lies hidden, waiting for someone willing to see, to listen, and to understand.